Welcome to this week's Life Group video. Thanks for joining in. My name is Pastor Nate. I had the privilege of teaching this Sunday. We're about halfway through our whole series in the life of Joseph, and about halfway through our Life Group season as well. I just wanted to bring a few things to your mind for discussion this week. First, what a great way to start possibly would be to begin by thinking of several vantage points where your people can look back and see how God has orchestrated events to their present situation. So like I mentioned this Sunday, oftentimes when we're in life, we're in the struggle, we can't see how God is moving. It's not until we're at a different vantage point that we can look back, and then all of a sudden it clicks. So maybe you could begin Life Group this week by just having a few people volunteer and say, hey, was there a time when you remember coming to a point in your life, a vantage point, and when everything began to click? And then you realize the past struggle or the pain, or when you didn't get the promotion, or when that girl didn't say yes to you, to go out, or those different things. You have a new vantage point and you can see how God was moving. Because that's really what happens, I believe, in the life of Joseph. As he stands before Pharaoh, everything begins to click. The past 13 years makes sense. Another thing, this week's message, to be honest, I said that in my prayer on Sunday, that it was like a sponge, just saturated. I believe there's so much truth to just squeeze out. You're not going to be able to cover everything. So really ask the Lord what He would like for your particular group. Here's a few other things that I was kind of thinking about. If you hadn't listened to last week's message by Pastor David, he talked about the principles of promotion. And that would be a great thing also to just discuss again if you didn't get a chance to last week. But, here we see Joseph changing career, unchanging character. A man of integrity, of truth, of honesty, regardless of the situation. You can think about, has there been a time in your life when you were promoted, but all of a sudden you began to feel kind of like you deserved some different things? Maybe you had some entitlement. And how was Joseph able to stay humble even though he actually was raised to an incredible position? You could talk about that as well in your life group. I also kind of see lots of different things. This idea of Joseph naming his sons Manasseh and Ephraim. Just a lot of things to think about there. You could just maybe generally ask the people in your life group, what are the values you want to instill in your family? And maybe there's some there that actually have done certain things, certain practices, certain rhythms and routines to their family that helped build their house upon the rock of Christ. So maybe you could even ask that as well. What are some things that you've done to instill godly values in your family? What did you do? Maybe there's someone in your life group that is actually ahead of the curve, a little bit farther down the path than other families there. You could ask them, how did you deal with a friend that was a bad influence in your kid's life? How did you handle sleepovers or movies and music? It'd be interesting to maybe have that kind of conversation as well. And even if your life group doesn't have families in it, you could still talk about the idea of making a decision, purposing that your home would be Christ grounded and Spirit filled. Talk about those values and what does that look like. Joseph, I believe, gives us a great launching point for that when he names his sons those Hebrew names. Another huge one, friends, another huge idea is this idea of Manasseh. That God allowed, in fact, the verse says God caused me to forget. And I would just imagine there's those in your life group that are hurting. I mean, that's why I think this series has been so impactful to our church. Who's not going through adversity? Who's not experiencing trial and pain? And so maybe talk about what does it mean to declare Manasseh on the past? To say, I'm going to forget what happened, the hurt, the pain, the injustice. People carry around this baggage with them all the time. And I believe it's in the life group setting where you can really enable the atmosphere of release and say, Lord, help us forget. And I think maybe you could even have a prayer time of that, and maybe actually declare certain things, describe, because life group's supposed to be intimate. Maybe there's certain things that actually in your life group, you actually just be specific and say, this is a hurt. My mom said this to me when I was a kid and I've never forgotten it. Or my father done this and it scarred me. Or this relationship that I had destroyed me for all future relationships and I can't get past it. Be specific perhaps. And allow the Spirit of God to come in and bring restoration. And Manasseh, forget and move on. You can never move forward if you keep looking behind. That's what Paul would say. I forget all things behind me and I strive forward for the goal. Great things to talk about as there as well. And maybe just lastly, think about this idea of the harvest. How hard is it to prepare for a famine in the year of plenty? So hard. It's not in the year when everything is going great that we seek the Lord. Why is it always when things are just horrible, then we find ourselves crying out to God? Lord, forgive us for needing a famine to cry out to you. Maybe you could talk about in your life group just ways to keep short accounts, ways to stay intimate with Jesus, ways to lay up treasure in heaven, to release the grasp that we have upon this world. A few thoughts for us this week. Be sure to, as the life group leader, be sure to be praying up this week. Go over the text. I believe the Holy Spirit will speak to you and your group and give you the words exactly the same. God bless.